and it's working. I don't want to mess with anything.
All right, so we are recording. Welcome to our book discussion. I'm going to start us off with what I thought about the book, just generally speaking. I'm not sure if I was the biggest fan of the book. I feel that just a few points, I feel that it could have featured a more diverse range of characters, especially with respect to race and ethnicity. I think that featuring a more diverse cast would have provided the author with a better opportunity to portray a more inclusive and realistic representation of the world. I also found the book's portrayal of autism to be a little oversimplified and kind of cliche at times. I understand that the book is supposed to be from the point of view of David's, is she 12? The 12-year-old sister. Yeah. But I feel like the text portrayal of autism is another missed opportunity, but one where the author could have attempted to challenge some stereotypes a little bit more in these cliches. But I appreciate what the author set out to do by writing the book. Anyone else?
I'll go. So I kind of like the book. And I did a little research on the author too. That actually the family dynamic was a little bit similar to her own, that her son actually did have autism. But she says she wrote the book from her perspective because sometimes she was embarrassed about the different ways that her son behaved. And it was her, like her daughter and husband that were like, just let it go. So I thought that was a good point to make in the book, is because like Catherine being a 12-year-old girl growing up, she's going to be super self-conscious about, how people view the dynamics of her family. And that she was just able to let it go. Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of it portrays those real biases, though, that, a 12-year-old girl is going to grow up with.
Right. And I think that I get that, but I feel like there could have been more of an opportunity, even more so at the end, to really challenge those a little bit more, especially because this book it does have a reading level for children, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say that I didn't really care for the book because it was really harsh. The 12-year-old just had too much responsibility. And I know it might have sounded oversimplified. I mean, I've had friends that they've had their children with autism and they've been asked to leave public places and libraries and things. And it was really hard on the parents. It made them feel really, I don't know about ashamed, but embarrassed. I think now the children are older and they're perfectly fine. It's when they're little and you need support from community. Of course, we took them to church also, and we never asked them to leave at church. We never do that. And so I think people just need to learn to, they need to learn how to handle and to understand those disabilities in a child.
So overall, I felt pretty emotional reading it. I was very frustrated at times, that especially during Catherine's thoughts the first time that we were introduced to Jason, and I was angry whenever she recounted incidents with Ryan, the neighborhood bully. Mostly I was upset about how Jason's mother never seemed to correct the speech therapist really for how she spoke to Jason, and it was very obvious just how no one presumed his competence by speaking loudly to him and addressing when the speech therapist would address his mom, how was his day? I agree with you, Mark, about some of the cliches, even though I've interacted with kids with autism who also speak through television shows and books. I agree that at some point it felt a little bit childish, even though, of course, it was written by a child. So I was trying to figure out exactly what I would change about the book, but I think it was a great starting point for conversation, especially with us and with kids if we did use it in the future.
All right. Well, I think we hit that point well. On to the next. So how it relates to our lives as educators. So I think that the text could be used as a resource for teachers with students who are on the autism spectrum, that or students or who have students who have family members who might be on the spectrum. The book may help teachers gain a better understanding of what life is like for families who deal with autism and the challenges that come with that. At a deeper level, I think the book underscores the importance of understanding and communicating in relationships. This part of the text, I think, could serve as a valuable lesson for teachers as they interact themselves with students and with families daily.
So I think one of the good things about the book to use as an educator is that it was written in 2006. So it could be a good starting point to show how much education has evolved for disabilities like autism. So I think when I think 2006, that was how many years ago now? It's been a while. We're nearing on 20, so
we're not
a
math
lot.
makers.
I know. I know. It's like 17 years, right? So it's getting there. So it could be a good book because I think the biases in it, I mean, I think you all work in schools, you still see some of that going on. But it could also show how far we've come.
Yeah, so it's almost interesting to look at it like a historiography almost.
Yeah.
To see how things were viewed. That's a good point.
Yeah.
You can go now. Well, okay, I just wanted to bring up one of the points that Emily and Mark made about the mother, Jason's mother. Maybe she wasn't, if she was aware, Jason, I don't know if Jason could have communicated. I'm not sure their relationship was like that compatible or something at that point, but because later on she protected him. But I just think that, yeah, the mother should have said something, but maybe she wasn't even aware. And if she was, then, like shame on her, and as a point for education, I mean, it could be a reference. I'm not sure. I mean, I didn't really care for the book. Well, because it's harsh and because Catherine had too much responsibility. The parents abdicated too much responsibility to their 12-year-old daughter for that kind of a disability. That's something that the parents should be more aware and more active, involved in that child's life. So that was why it was harsh for me to listen and to read. And I mean, I suppose it could be a reference, but I'm not sure it would be, in fact, I might go to my friends and ask them and I've asked them their tips and their real life experiences with their autistic children. I know 2 or 3 at least. And, if we took enough notes, we could write a book and they could write their own book. And then we could use other references and real life situations.
Yeah, so the main idea I took away as a teacher educator was to always expect growth from your students and to always presume competency. It's our responsibility as teachers to explore, alternative ways of communication other than just verbal communication that we're used to. When I observed a 611 class with kids with autism, many of them were using assistive technology, but there was also visuals throughout the entire classroom. In every part of the day. And so it just really made me consider what my future classroom would look like, not just for kids with autism, but in general, how do we communicate? And then I do think it's a great tool for, like Jen, you kind of mentioned about family units and what communication looks like within a family, because, it was unfair, you could say, to Catherine to have that much responsibility, but overall it was just how could that family communicate to work better as a team. And yeah, I think it brought up a lot of great points.
I agree. And just to be clear, I don't fault the book for showing how things can be unfair or for bringing to light these biases. That's not what I'm saying when I criticize the book. So our third point, if we made any personal connections. So I don't have any family members who are on the autism spectrum or really have any disabilities like that, but I do have a brother who is transgender. And being on the autism spectrum and being transgender are not very similar. But having a loved one that struggles with either I'm just looking at my notes, sorry. Oh, having a loved one that struggles with either requires the family to adapt and to navigate new challenges while they seek to understand and support their loved one. And so this book's themes of understanding and acceptance resonated with my experiences of supporting my brother's identity.
So
That's a great point. Sorry, go ahead, Jane.
that's okay. Like personal connections, like yeah, I don't really have any family members that have been diagnosed with anything. But then again, a lot of that stuff wasn't diagnosed. So like it wasn't so visible back then, But I did have, so I grew up near Batavia, where they have this New York State School for the Blind, and we had a lot of family friends that worked there. So and when I worked at the restaurant in Batavia, like we would get groups of them in all the time. So it's good to just to be around it, to know what kind of their needs are, and to not be shocked when things happen or things get loud. So that's my personal connection.
Yeah, I think I lost one point. I have a family member. He's one of the moms I was referring to. We found out my daughter married his cousin, so now we're cousins on distance. So anyway, Anton was autistic growing up, and he's one of the children that was asked to leave. His mother was asked to, leave the library with her son, and so, so there's my cousin. And now my daughter is trying to convince me and to Jen's point that they weren't, she's trying to convince me that she's a female autism. Okay. She's 35. She's 37, I think now. And they didn't diagnose that stuff in those days. She did fine in school. I also know she had depression, so I treated her for clinical depression. Okay. I had 2 children with clinical depression. So autism, I'm not so sure. She was fine going to school. So, and anyway, she's an adult now. So she has to, learn to cope. And you can't go back. You can't say, oh, my mother this or my mother or my father this or that, people do. They get stuck in their lives. But, I haven't done that. And I've tried to keep moving forward. If my parents made mistakes, and now if I might have a learning disability, I don't know if it's a disability, that would be like ADHD or something. I don't know if that's considered, is that considered? Okay. So I didn't discover that until I was an adult, highly an adult. I was in college for my bachelor's degree. And who do I blame? I don't blame anyone. I just focus and I try to get through it and undertake these challenges.
Yeah, that's a really great point, that a lot of times I feel like adults now are realizing that they may have a disability or they may be neurodivergent when it wasn't diagnosed as a kid, however many years ago. That's a great point. I think there's 2 main reasons I had such an emotional reaction to the book. The first being that I could definitely feel my own previous uncomfortable emotions and biases from when I was younger. I was in a hospital a lot because of my mom's job. And so I was around people with physical disabilities, and I felt uncomfortable as a kid. And I felt like I didn't know how to interact with them when really I should have just been myself. And I just didn't understand at that time how I was acting like wrong, I guess. And the second reason was could feel angry whenever Ryan would make fun of David, because my brother was made fun of a lot, and he also wasn't diagnosed with autism. But he's just, a little different, and he does have ADHD. And I would get really angry because people would bully him, and he ended up being homeschooled instead. And so that's really the biggest personal connection I had, that I could feel myself being that big sister standing up for my little brother, just as Catherine did. So
Nice. Thank you.
Very nice. So our last point, how would we see ourselves using this text in our future teaching? So, like I said, I think the book did a decent job. I may or may not use this text in my future teaching, but I have been inspired to find a book or some books that I think may better illustrate what I think this book sought to do. Out of My Mind by Sharon Draper, I think, seems to cover a lot of what I thought was kind of missing in this text. So I may give that a read, and I might use that in my future teaching.
Okay, I think I think the book was a good reference point. I don't know if it would be feasible, to use as a resource in the content education area that I want to be in, but it was a good reference point so that you could opens your eyes a little bit to see the family dynamic, what those students with disabilities face every day. I think that was the best part of the book for me.
So I also agree that it was a great reference point of something to use in the future, or maybe a section to use in the future. I plan on teaching the littles, so this wouldn't be the same thing, but I think it's a great point to make sure we include all types of decorations and books and materials in our class that provide those mirrors so that every child can see themselves in what we're using every day in the class. And that was the main point I took away from it.
I think it would be good for the parents to read, to see how much I put kind of a lot of responsibility on my oldest daughter as a single mom with 4. And so I guess that brings out some emotion also. I'm the oldest of 6. My mother I was highly responsible, so much so that I was like almost shoved aside, and, my sisters and brothers took preference. So and at the age of 5, when my little sister was crying, I said, honey, you have to get used to this, the way the world is. Yes, I was 5.
That's it.
So, I know about responsibility, and I just, if I had to play over some things, I would change some things. Okay. So, I just think that from the parents' point of view, the parents should read it and see if they find themselves in this situation and change it like I have.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Does anyone else have something they want to share or their thoughts?
It's tea. It's fine.
Nope, I'm
I
good.
think I'm all set.
Thank you so much. We enjoyed.
Yes. Thank you for
Thanks, y'all.
watching our discussion.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Jen.
Welcome.